Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Impactful Coaches podcast, where we talk about entrepreneurship, high achievement, and success. And in today's episode, we have a special guest, Mike Konrad, founder and CEO of Aqueous Technologies and author of The Reluctant Entrepreneur. Mike's story is incredibly unique because he didn't start or he didn't plan to become an entrepreneur. He started his business just because his employer rejected a technology that he had developed. He went on to build this business, but then as soon as he started, he ran into several hurdles like we all come across. A legal battle, there was limited business experience, and there was financial issues. But in spite of all that, Mike grew his company, Aqueous Technologies, into a global company serving 6 continents today. He's kind of semi-retired right now, and he's an international speaker, industry educator, and host of the Reliability Matters and Reluctant Entrepreneur podcast. In this conversation, we're going to explore how Mike turned rejection and his uncertainty into resilience and built his business, and what other entrepreneurs can learn from his experience. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Harry. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. So Mike, tell me about your journey. What made you start building Aqueous Technologies? I understand that you developed a certain piece of technology. Just walk us all a little more about that.
Well, I'm in the electronics manufacturing space. I was working for an equipment manufacturer beginning in 1985. Yes, Harry, there was a 1985. I was in it. And I was 24 years old. And by the time, say 1989, 1990 rolled around, our industry was facing a pretty major dilemma. There's a chemical that's used widely within the electronics manufacturing industry. Specifically, it was a cleaning chemical that was used to clean circuit boards after they were soldered, to remove all the contaminants from the soldering process off the boards. The environmentalists of the world and scientists of the world discovered that the Earth's ozone layer was thinning out. It was depleting. And they determined that one of the many causes, there were natural causes of that, and then there were man-made causes of that. And one of the man-made causes of that was certain ozone depleting chemicals. Well, that's what our industry used. The almost exclusively, our industry used these ozone depleting chemicals and called CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons. And there was a treaty signed in Montreal, now referred to as the Montreal Protocol, that eventually became ratified by every UN member country, mine, yours, all the countries in between, that would provide a 10-year phase-out for these CFC-based chemicals. And our industry freaked out. It's like, oh no, we can't take that away from us. It would be like the world banning oil in 10 years. It would be a major news story. So within our space, that was a major news story. So there was a lot of effort by a lot of different companies to develop a replacement chemical that was just as effective, that did not contain CFCs. And it turns out those CFCs, while they like to eat ozone, they also do a really good job at cleaning. And long story short, there was no replacement chemical that was anywhere near as good. And that caused the industry to panic even more. So I had an idea that why don't we just change the paradigm? Instead of waiting for a new chemical to come out or trying to develop a new chemical, why don't we just create a different technology that doesn't rely on that type of chemical at all? And I had some ideas. Some other companies had played with it. They just didn't do it very well. And I thought, well, I think they're onto something, but they're just not there. They didn't take that idea over the finish line. I think if we do it right, we can take it over the finish line. So I pitched the idea to them, and they were not interested. So I was so obsessed with this idea that I offered to design it myself on my own time, my own money, my own risk, and see what they thought. And they went, okay, that sounds good to them. So I did that, and showed them the finished product and a little bit more detail on the intro, they did like it. And I sold it to them. And everything was great. In fact, that product outsold all the other products that we were selling at the time. So I thought, Harry, I thought I had this newfound stature in the company that, I got a lot of respect. I got a lot of street cred. I'm everything now because I saved the company. And we had a product design meeting where we were going to discuss future products. And I had a list of ideas for the next generation of machine because although it did eliminate the need to use those chemicals, it did put stuff down the drain. And I'm thinking that's going to be the next thing the government's concerned about. Not what's going up into the air, but what's going down the drain. We need to come up with a machine that doesn't have a drain, that recycles everything. So I was absolutely confident that when I marched into this meeting, that they would, fan me with grape leaves and carry me in on a chariot and, all of that, none of which happened, obviously. And I pitched the idea to my boss. And at the same time, another team member pitched their idea to the boss. And the boss chose the other idea. And I couldn't understand that. It was like a sucker punch. I'm like, my idea worked. It's saved the company. We're selling more of these machines than we can even keep up with. And I've got an even better idea. And how could you say no? And then my boss said one word, 4 letters long, that began with F. And it's not the word you're thinking, Harry. It's another word. And that's the word that started my company. One word, single syllable. This is the word. I said to him, I think you're making a mistake. And he looked at me very dismissively and he said, fine. I don't care. Fine. The moment I heard that word, first, I was angry. I was hurt. I felt very disrespected. I felt like I didn't matter. I felt very small. And I felt stupid for all the passion that I had for this idea. And that instantly converted to a new commitment. I'm going to start a company and I'm going to do it myself. It took a year, but I went home. I converted my garage once again to a mad scientist studio and began working on another piece of technology that would be better, faster, more efficient, and most importantly, no drain. And once I developed the technology far enough along to the point where I really couldn't have a foot in both worlds because I stayed at the job and I separated the duties. Once I got the proof of concept down enough to have confidence that I could do it, I put my notice in and started my own company. So that was the journey of my company. Hence, I refer to myself as a reluctant entrepreneur because my desire was not to start a company. My desire was to launch this product and see this product serve our industry.
So from there, you started the business. And when you started the business, how much did you have effectively in the bank when you resigned and started the business?
How
many months of runway did you? Yep. How much money did you have in the bank? Or how much of runway did you have?
When you said in the introduction that I had limited business experience, that was very generous. I had no business experience, Harry. But what I didn't have any runway, really. I just had a small bank account and a few credit cards, and that was about it. I signed a lease on a very small building within an industrial park, about 1,200 square feet, which is very small, and that didn't cost too much. And my wife was working, so fortunately we had enough income to eat and pay the mortgage, but not much else. And I started setting up business, and I thought, well, I should probably go to a bank. That's what people do when they start businesses, right, Harry? You go to a bank, and they give you money. So I went to the bookstore. I was too cheap to buy the book, but I bought, I don't know, I don't remember the name of the book. It was like Business Plans for Dummies or something. It was a rudimentary guide to writing a business plan. And I sat on the floor of this bookstore and tried to memorize as much as that book as possible. And I got a few key concepts down. I rushed home and put together a hastily prepared business plan, put it in a $1 little presentation folder, thought, okay, this is my golden ticket, right? I'm gonna get the money. Who can say no to this business plan? So I made an appointment with a bank, and I took it in there, and they thanked me, and they said, okay, we'll submit it to the loan committee, and we'll get back with you. And a few days later, 4 or 5 days later, I get a letter in the mail. Dear Mr. Konrad, and you can imagine how it went, thanks for thinking of us, but we're not interested at this time. So I thought, okay, make a few tweaks to the business plan, go to a second bank. Dear Mr. Konrad, second bank. Okay, I think I got it down now. Went to a third bank. Of course, dear Mr. Konrad. So 3 strikes and you're out, as we say in baseball. So I'm like, okay, plan B. So I went to my father. Now, it's kind of important to understand a couple things about my father. He's an immigrant here to the United States. He came here with my mother in 1957. He had to learn to speak English and went to college during the day, worked at night, and kind of built his American dream, as we like to say. And he was always exceptionally financially conservative. When I was a young, punky teenager, I kind of referred to him as the cheapest man on the planet. If we didn't need it, we didn't have it. I had everything I needed as a child, everything I needed. Not a lot of things I wanted, but that's good. I mean, I got everything I needed. So I'm like, okay, well, at that point, we'd charged up all our credit cards. We'd emptied our bank account. We were hand to mouth at that point. So I thought, I'll go to my dad. He's going to say no, but at least I'll practice my pitch for maybe future investors. So I made an appointment with him. My wife and I went over to the house and talked to my father and my mother, and I gave the pitch. And he said, okay, let me talk to your mother, and I'll get back with you. Well, that was always, when I was a child, that was always code for no. Instead of telling me no and watching me melt down, he would say, let me think about it, which always was no. So I'm like, okay. So I was ready for the no. And we went back to the house a few days later, and he said, I was looking for $35,000. To me, that was like $35 million. I didn't even know what $35,000 would even feel like. So he said, your mother and I have looked at your business plan, and we don't think it's a good idea to loan you $35,000. And seconds before I was ready to give my concession speech, well, thanks, Dad, I appreciate you listening, he said, we don't think that's enough. We think you're going to need 70. And he loaned me $70,000, which seemed like $70 billion to me. And he didn't have the cash. He was very frugal. He had all his little savings invested. So his house was paid off at that time. So he took a loan against his house to fund me $70,000. So I thought, okay, I'm set. And by the way, it wasn't a gift. It was a loan at 10% interest. My dad wasn't a fool. He was still conservative. And I'm like, oh, fine. That's no problem. Win for him, win for me. And I thought, okay, I'm on easy street now. Now I have more money than I need. I can fully fund the business, and we're going to be doing great. And then one day, shortly after that, a car pulled into the business parking lot, and a man walked out of the car, walked into our lobby, and asked for me. So I'm like, oh, okay, it's probably a vendor, or something. So I went up front, and he hands me an envelope, and he says 3 words that changed the trajectory of at least that part of the business. Those 3 words were, you've been served. The 3 words that a process server says when they hand you a lawsuit. And it turned out that my former employer, that was fine with not taking my idea, was no longer fine. They were not fine. And they wanted to sue me. They did sue me to stop the business because they thought that for some reason, even though they said no, it still belonged to them, even though I developed everything on my own, made that very clear. So guess where that 70,000 went? The majority of that 70,000 went to fight the lawsuit. It lasted a year, and we won, obviously. But by the time, a year after that, by the time we found out we won, the money was long gone. And we then had to rebuild the finances of the business. And I had one goal after that. This is probably not a good thing to have, this particular goal, but it served me well at the time. I had one main goal after we won, and that was to get revenge. I was angry. I was bitter. I wanted to prove to my old boss that I was right and that he was wrong. And I needed to pay my father back. I could not fail, Harry. Failure was absolutely not an option because I needed to get revenge, and I could not fail my family. So those two emotions, desperate not to fail and revenge, anger, those really were the rocket fuel that pushed us out of that hole. And I don't suggest anger and revenge and being desperate are key ingredients to start a business, but they were key for me.
In a way, as you say it, it's like when you had the lawsuit happen and when your dad loaned you the money, but even though he gave you the money, it was not a gift, but it was more of a loan, so you had to pay it back. So in that particular case, and then getting sued and losing all of that money, in a way, the universe burned the bridges for you, so you stay in the business.
It burned the boats. Yeah, absolutely. It burned the bridges. Yeah. It burned everything down.
It burned everything down.
And that's one thing I've learned after 34 years of owning this business with perspective and altitude, that there was a destiny. I was not aware of it. And there was a plan. The universe, I like to refer to the business gods, and I mean that more metaphorically than spiritually. But they had a plan. And I didn't see it. And if they did show it to me, I would reject it. I would say, no, I'm going to do something else. And so they slowly, the room starts to shrink. The walls start to come in. Certain doors start to close. Certain pathways go away. And you end up going down this, what seems random at the time, this predestined route. And it's only clear from hindsight, from perspective. You don't really know it. It's like you're in a hedge maze. You can't really see where you're going. You just know you're making turns and twists and hoping to get out the other side. But there was a plan, and I was just not a party to it. but I ended up where I was supposed to be, nonetheless.
Yep, absolutely. That's pretty true. That's destiny, right? Not everybody in business. If you look at 10 people in business, not everybody starts out the business because they wanted to, right? Some will get pushed into situations like you, some because of financial need, some because of no choice, whatever that is. But eventually that's like the universe working for you, right? Universe saying, hey, this is what you need to do, all right? No matter what tantrums you throw, I'm going to give you hardships. I'm going to beat you down to your knees. You're going to figure out, you're going to learn your lessons and then come out on top. That's how sometimes the business teaches a lesson.
Yeah, I think when you start a business, when you enter entrepreneurship, it's like you enrolled in university, only there's no buildings, there's no specific instructors. It's It's the business gods again. And much like the military, when someone joins the military in pretty much any country, the first thing they do is they go through boot camp. And the drill sergeants in boot camp, they have one job: break you and then rebuild you into the soldier that they need you to be. But it starts with taking away who you are and rebuilding you into something, in their mind, better. And I think that when you start a business for any length of time, the business gods break you and rebuild you into a proper entrepreneur. And a lot of the lessons that I learned were very counterintuitive to what I believed. So I fought it all along the way. But eventually, we learn, what a business person should know. And in many cases, it's not comfortable. It's hard. You have to let go of a lot of ego, and you have to look through a different lens than one was looking through, prior to that. But if you stick with it, you come out the other side capable of growing and scaling a business. But in my case, it wasn't easy. It was very difficult. And in all the entrepreneurs I've spoken with over the years, they tell a very similar story. It's a process. It's a curriculum. It's like a university course, only you never graduate. It's perpetual learning. Even now, after 34 years, I'm still learning things about business that, and the world changes. And there are certain fundamentals that never change, but there's a lot of things that do change, relative to the rest of the world and technology and all of that. And we're in the tech industry. So, my industry changed since we started this conversation, about 25 minutes ago. So, you got to stay sharp and you got to be willing to listen and adapt and collaborate with the universe.
Yep, that's very true, because I was just having a conversation with another guest, who talks about the founder's hamster wheel trap. And as you said, as a business owner, sometimes you have to learn new skills. One of the things that limits a business is the skill of the business owner themselves, whether they have the right skills or not, whether they have the right kind of resources, from a skill standpoint.
Well, we talk about, we put a lot of effort into scaling the business. The business has to scale, has to get bigger. What we don't put a lot of emphasis on is scaling the founder. The business can outgrow the founder. This happens all the time. In the US, and it's probably the same in India, it's probably the same in most countries, 80% of all startup businesses ultimately fail. 80%. If you went to the doctor and the doctor said, Harry, you got an 80% chance of dying, you're going to start making end of life plans. You're not going to start making major investments, right? You're going to bucket list time. And yet every entrepreneur that starts a company faces an 80% statistical chance of failure. So, there's a certain mindset when you go into business. And I think 80% of businesses, well, first of all, one might say, well, if 80% of businesses fail, business is very risky. I don't believe business is risky. I think entrepreneurs who don't scale their selves, their abilities to match the needs of the business at the scale it's at, that's the reason businesses fail. I think 100% of the 80% of those businesses that fail because the founder failed to scale their skill sets for what the business needed. And they failed the business. The business didn't fail the founder. The founder failed the business. I think that's the majority of the time that happens.
Yep, that's very true. The founder not upskilling themselves, and that's what causes the business to fail. It's not that. Now, speaking of this, let's say if if you are dealing with an entrepreneur similar to you, in that particular trajectory, they've been forced into starting a business or they are running a business and they're not really happy with the level of growth that they have right now and they're frustrated because they've run into one bottleneck of another. What would your advice be on how to get out of that situation?
I used to chase KPIs, key performance indicators. So, for example, we pay, our payroll is every week, every Thursday. So when the business was young, I dreaded Thursdays, Harry. I dreaded Thursdays because we had to have the money to cover payroll. So starting every Monday, I would go on a hunt for cash so that we had enough reserves to cover payroll. And I would end up making deals with customers. Very low profit, sometimes zero profit, sometimes a little bit of a loss, just to bring in cash to cover payroll. I didn't care about profit because that wasn't Monday's problem. That's next month's problem. So, and then we would try and get more market share. And I would put all my emphasis on trying to get more market share. And that would be at the expense of something else. Then we needed faster cash turnover. We needed to reduce lead times in building. So I would put all my emphasis into reducing lead times. And that would result in quality problems. And every time I focused on one KPI, it was at the expense of the others. And then a mentor said to me, stop focusing on getting cash, because you'll get the cash, but it'll be costly. It'll come at the expense of something else. Just focus on making great decisions and use the cash or the market share or the lead times as a scorecard for your decisions. It's like, well, I can't not think about covering payroll. It's due in 3 days. Just start making great decisions. So we put all those KPIs aside and we just strove to make the best decisions that we could possibly make. And guess what improved? All of those KPIs started improving. And soon we didn't have to struggle for cash every Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday to cover Thursday's payroll. So, it's kind of a be careful what you ask for, because you might get it and it's not going to be what you think. So that's what I would recommend. And it seems a little crazy. It doesn't seem very, tactical and very strategic enough, but that philosophy has not failed me in decades. Make great decisions. If you don't see an improvement in your KPIs, relook at those decisions you're making. There's something not right there. Keep adjusting your decision process until the KPIs reflect, a positive scorecard.
Can you give me an example of some of those decisions?
Well, yeah. We, in the early days, we were so desperate for business. Everybody was our customer. Anyone with a faint promise to pay us would be our customer. And eventually we learned that we had good customers and toxic customers. We had people we love and people who were just trolls. And the toxic customers, the trolls that we managed to attract through our horrible advertising campaigns, were costing us way more money than we ever made on them, if we made anything on them, because they were needy and they would not maintain. We have very sophisticated equipment that requires proper maintenance. They wouldn't do any maintenance, and then they blame us, and it just costs us money. And then I came to the realization that, wait a minute, so desperate for a customer to come our way, we'll do anything, and it shows, and they know it, and they take advantage of that. Why don't we be more selective? Why don't we choose our customers? They're choosing us. Why don't we choose our customers? It's like when a man and a woman meet. Each one kind of chooses the other. Now, the man probably is a little, knowing most men, they're probably just like, hey, she's good looking. Yeah, you're perfect. Let's go. But really, at the end of the day, we choose each other in a relationship. And I think the same applies in business, only most businesses are just so hoping that the customer will choose them, pick me, pick me, pick me, that they end up with a mixture of quality clients and less quality clients. So we had to develop the discipline to say no. And I learned that sometimes, in fact, many times, the word no is way more profitable than the word yes. So that was one thing that we had to adjust in our decision tree. Let's stop being everything to everybody, because it's the outliers that are just sucking down all of our business. In business, we hear a lot about the 80-20 rule. Only in our case, it's kind of reversed. In our case, where instead of 20% of the products make us, 80% of the money, in this case, 20% of our customers were costing us 80% of our money. It was kind of a negative 80-20 rule. And when we got rid of that 20% of those types of customers that we attracted, they didn't do anything wrong. We attracted them. Business changed almost overnight. And our sales were based on relationship selling, less transactional selling. We attracted clients that cared about the process, the equipment. They did their maintenance when they should. They partnered with us and suggested improvements and ideas for new products, and really it was a collaboration. And they paid on time. Go figure. They did not negotiate very much. They didn't try and strip all the profit out of the machine for us. And it was a really good win-win relationship-based customer-client collaboration.
Makes sense. What would you say about choosing the customer is very true, because if a business is stuck with the wrong types of customers, that in turn itself causes a lot of difficulty. Now, you mentioned something about attracting the wrong customers versus attracting the right customers, right? So what could founders do to attract more of the right customers instead of the wrong customers? Do you have any suggestions, or do you have any recommendations based on your experience?
In our case, we had to relook at our marketing strategy. Our marketing, now keep in mind, when I started the company, one of the primary motivations was revenge and this desperate need to not fail my father. So our marketing strategies reflected that. So our advertising was braggadocious, chest pounding, obnoxious, in your face. We are the best. Everyone else sucks. We were negative advertising. We were grandiose. It was cringeworthy, looking back at it. We submitted our products into industry award categories. We won almost 50 major industry awards, and to the point where that became suspicious. It's like no one took it seriously because we just won every year for like 10 years. And it was, looking back, it was pretty bogus to begin with. And one year we were at a trade show, and we ran trade shows like, we did we ran our outrageous advertising. We went over the top at trade shows. So I rented a waterfall for the stand, for the booth. It was 30 feet wide, 15 feet tall. And instead of dropping curtains of water, it had thousands of nozzles at the top of the waterfall that were computer controlled, and they would release water in a very particular order. So droplets would fall from the sky in the shape of words and images would fall from the sky. It was quite spectacular. I'd never seen anything like it. And I think we rented it for like $70,000 or some outrageous number for 3 days of the trade show. And I went all in on it because every year we just needed to have, something bigger in the booth. And in prior years, we've had magicians in the booth. We've had video games in the booth. We've had surfboards. We've had anything that's kind of outrageous just to attract attention. So this attracted attention. So the morning the show opened, we had all of our equipment lined up in front of the waterfall. And our equipment is on wheels. It's big, heavy, but a few people can move it around. And we stage it all, and everything was looking so good. And someone came up to me and said, hey, before the show gets too busy, I am so impressed with this booth. I want to show all my colleagues. Is it okay if I take a picture of it? And I'm patting myself on the back going, okay, yeah, we're off to a great start. That was a great investment. And then he noticed our equipment was on wheels, and he said, Mike, is there any way you can move your equipment out of the way so I can get a better picture of the waterfall? And Harry, sometimes the universe is subtle, and sometimes it's direct. This was a mallet into the face, direct message. Why are we putting waterfalls in the booth? We don't sell waterfalls. What are we thinking? And at that very moment, it hit me, finally. It hit me. What are we doing? We're just competing against ourselves. We're just making noise. We're not necessarily selling more. If we are selling, it's in spite of the waterfall, not because of it. So at that very moment, I made a commitment to myself and my team. We're done with this marketing strategy. We're going to change it. We're going to make some major changes. We're not doing this again. I canceled the rest of the contracts for trade shows for the rest of the year. I canceled all of our, back in those days, we were doing a lot of magazine ads, trade magazine ads. I canceled all the ads and said, okay, we're done. Turn off the marketing machine. And we did it, cold turkey. Just that was it. And then we replaced it with education-based marketing, what I like to call conscious marketing, where we create content. Now, content was a little different back then because, it was the early days of webinars. There were no podcasts back then. No one even knew what that word meant. But we started producing live workshops, 100% non-commercial, where we just talk about best practices. I started speaking at the trade shows I was formerly exhibiting in. So instead of being on the exhibit floor with my waterfalls and magicians and video games, I was upstairs in the conference room behind a lectern teaching. And we started, I wrote some small books. I started doing all these white papers, publishing all these white papers. We started doing the webinars when those became popular, and eventually started a podcast on the subject of reliability of electronics, which is the space we're in. And we substituted conventional marketing to this conscious marketing, where it's all education-based. And that changed our world, completely changed our world. We started attracting very high-quality customers that, go figure, they pay on time. They don't beat us up. They collaborate with us, as I mentioned earlier. It changed the way the world saw us. It changed the way the industry saw us. We started to become an authority in our space. And when you become an authority, you become an influencer, an authority-based influencer, not a celebrity influencer. And people will reach out to us with honest questions and wanting honest conversations, not having to deal with obnoxious salespeople every time they call. So when we became unattached to the outcome, like we're not going to do this and then wait for the phones to ring for sales. We're not going to have a call to action every time we talk to a customer. We're just going to educate, provide best practice advice, and know that educated people make educated choices. And if we consider ourselves an educated choice, start educating, quit selling. And that's when I learned that the best way to sell our product is to stop talking about our product. Connect with the customer on a level that is real, it's authentic, an emotional connection. And once that happens, they're your customer for life. They join your tribe. They spread the word. They recommend. They provide great comments, publicly. It's win-win. So that's an example of how we change the marketing.
Now, what would your advice be for a founder, who's not done education marketing, he's just been doing marketing just for the sake of it? What would your baby steps or steps you would entail for them to start trying or experimenting with education marketing based on your experience?
Well, it needs to be authentic. You can't fake your way into that because people see through that, particularly today with all the content that's available. Every company is in business to either solve a problem or fill a need or do something better or more efficiently or for less cost or whatever their niche is. They all have something that they're trying to do beyond just selling product. And if your product serves a certain need or solves a specific problem, as it did in our case, start talking about the problem, not necessarily the solution. We led with talking about the solution to a problem customers didn't know they had. We could talk all day long about our solution. We can throw out specifications and ratings and all this stuff that doesn't land. It has no place to stick. You're throwing stuff at a Teflon wall. It just falls off it. Figure out what your particular clients' needs are, the problems they're having that your products or services solve, and connect to the customer on that level. Go into any interface you have with a client, unattached to the outcome. Now that takes discipline, because of course we want sales. That's what makes the world go round, right? We need transactions, we need money. But disconnect yourself from that primary goal. The customer can see that. Just like animals can see fear, customers can see desperation. Really connect to the customer on an emotional level. And just put call to actions on hold. If work on becoming an authority in your space, educate, create content on YouTube, for example, or whatever platform that educates your customers on the general subject that your industry serves. And don't say, if you need me, if you need a product, call now, just provide education. When you're getting old, you've become your father when you start a sentence with kids these days. But I'll say it, I'll become my father. Kids these days, young people these days, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alphas, they are, particularly millennials, they're going up through the ranks in business now. They're not teenagers anymore. They are now getting to a point of influence in their company where they can actually select products. They're the people that are going to be choosing your products if they're not already. And that generation and the two younger generations right behind them do not subscribe to the concept of looking at ads. They don't see ads. They grew up with a screen in their face. They search content. They look for an influencer, for better or for worse. They look for someone to influence them. They look for an expert. They go on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, and they look for content that solves a problem in their life. And they don't look at brochures, and they don't look at spec sheets, and they certainly don't look at ads or banner ads, on a screen. They look for content with someone they can relate to, someone they trust, someone that they consider an expert. So when Harry recommends XYZ, like, oh, I'm going to look at that. And then Harry has a YouTube video with links, to the products in it, but they believe what Harry says or what Mike says. So start creating content that is actually useful beyond just, getting sales. Be authentic and do it repeatedly and regularly. If you attend trade shows in your industry, I'm not saying get out of trade shows, don't exhibit, but put as much attention, if not more, on what's going up upstairs. Almost every trade show has two things going on simultaneously. The expo floor, where all the, all the high-tech carnies are, all the trades are done, all that's done on the floor. That's all the drama. And then usually upstairs in the conference area, that's where people go to learn and solve problems and come out with solutions. That's where I would be. And if your team wants to go on the floor and do all the, circus stuff that goes on, fine, no problem. Keep doing it. But go up on the floor. Start establishing authority in your space, even if it's a very niche space. I'm in one of the most niche industries you can possibly be in. The specific part of our industry is very, very niche. And one might say, well, how can you talk about that forever? Well, it's easy. I can. And the fact that I'm in such a niche, I'm one of very few people talking about it, which serves me well. So that's what I would do. I would start creating content, start providing value. Make sure every time you're in front of a lectern, every time you run an ad, if you do, every time you're in front of a camera, provide value. Don't turn everything into a sales pitch. Just provide valuable content. And that will result in a new breed of customers coming your way and more of them than you had before. Our sales rose dramatically when we made that shift from conventional marketing to conscious marketing.
Yep, I agree with you. Building authority and then going from, traditional advertising or traditional marketing, you have to be conscious and you have to educate your audience. The word that I like to coin is the needs, desires, and pains of my target market. We need to talk about them. It's not just about pitching my product. My product will come later, but it's about building that ecosystem where I open up to have conversations about their needs, desires, and pains. That's what's pretty important to build authority.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that. The product will come later. I don't want anyone saying that Mike's crazy. He just believes that, if he just, says cool things and creates a bunch of authority, the sales process will take care of itself. It's not quite that way. We do have conversations about our product. We do talk about our specifications. We do talk about pricing when it's appropriate. It's not appropriate to just put that out there. It's appropriate to establish the authority, create a real authentic connection, determine whether or not we are a right fit for them and whether they are a right fit for us, and then move ahead. We just put the cart before the horse for so many years. And when we do it in the right order, connection, authority, connection, relationship, earned trust, influence, mutual selection, then product and specs and pricing and negotiations and all the stuff that go with it are in order, just at the right time. It's just, you wouldn't walk up to you, Harry, would not walk up to a beautiful woman on the street and say, first words, will you marry me? Right? I mean, you might, but you're not going to get anywhere with that. And if for some reason that woman said, sure, that's going to be a failed marriage, right? Yeah, there's a courtship process. There's a learning each other. There's a trust process, a falling in love process. And although that sounds silly to apply to business, we fall in love with our customers. They fall in love with us, a different type of love, but one that we wish each other well. We want to make sure that they are successful and we are successful. It's a mutually beneficial relationship.
That's pretty true. For the members of our audience, if you are looking to grow your business, it's just not about directly approaching people and then trying to close conversations. It's also about playing the part of the courtship process, about educating your audience and then building that trust. So then it turns into a valuable customer for you that basically stays with you for life. So, Mike, for our audience, if you were to recommend a book that they should read, to grow their business, what would that book be like?
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt at all. That would be Good to Great by Jim Collins. He wrote a few books. One of them was Built to Last. The one that, that's a good book too. But the one I would recommend would be Good to Great. What Jim Collins did in that book is he compared pairs of publicly traded companies. He chose publicly traded companies because you can look at their books, right? You can see their numbers. They have to post that legally. So he took a pair of companies in a number of different fields, and he chose a pair. He chose one company that did very well in their space and another company in the same space that did poorly. And two of the companies, just to give an example, were personal grooming product companies. One was Kimberly-Clark and the other, they were shaving companies. So one was Schick and one was Gillette. Both of them make razors and shaving cream and other personal products. And I forget which one did well and which one did less well in the same exact space. But the one that did well, he looked at across a number of industries, of the pairs of companies and across a number of industries. He took all the ones that did better in their space and studied them and started coming up with common denominator attributes. Like what are they all doing different than their competitor? And he found that there was a lot of things they were doing within their different space in a similar fashion. Made it quite a scientific, in-depth research project. He came up with a list of things that they were doing well. And then on the companies that were doing less well, what are the attributes they all have in common? And he determined what they had in common. And it became very clear that the businesses that did better in their space had certain attributes, and the businesses that did poorly had different attributes. And then he identified what those attributes were. And when you look at the list of attributes on either side, it's easy to go, wait, ooh, this sounds more like us. We need to be on the other side. And then he coined a phrase, which I love, which is good is the enemy of great. And that phrase landed with me because when our company first started, we struggled. I'd mentioned that. Everything was a struggle. And then eventually, when we got past the lawsuit and we paid the attorneys back and paid my father back and things were going good. Not great, but they weren't bad. They were going good. Once things started going good, I stopped trying to be better because I was just so happy I wasn't doing bad. And I was not willing to risk good to try and be great. So I just sat at good for quite some time. And it felt safe. It felt comfortable, like getting into, below the sheets of a nice warm bed in the wintertime. It just felt, cozy to be good. And the problem with just being good is everyone in your space, not everyone, but most people in your space are good. They're doing good enough. And eventually good starts to erode. And if you're in a big pool of companies that all do good, you don't stand out. You're just one of many. And very few do great. And to me, your option is either don't do it or be great. Strive to be the best in what you do, best in class. That comes out of Jim Collins' book. To go from good to great. There's comfort in good, but there's not longevity in good. There's no differentiation. It's a sea of non-spectacularity just to be good. You have to be great.
That's a very great example that you brought up because I remember in one of Jim Collins' book, I remember him mentioning this example of how the camera company, Kodak, all right, how they failed at innovating when the time was right, when the market was right, and then Nokia took over market share. But then now we live in a completely different world where even Nokia has been overtaken and killed, So that's
I produce a series on my Reluctant Entrepreneur podcast called Reluctant Lessons, where I profile high-profile business failures. And yeah, Kodak's one of them. They were actually one of the original developers of digital camera technology. And then they buried it because they didn't want to lose the chemical business. And Polaroid, who uses Polaroid anymore? Digital cameras killed that. BlackBerry, the originator of a smartphone. Where are they now? They don't sell phones anymore. They sell software now. It's you either be great or you die.
You die. Yep. You work to become great or you die. That's the lesson that's a lesson, I think, as a message that we should share to every entrepreneur who's listening in. If you are in business, better start if you are in business, you've got to start working on what you need to do to become great. And if you're not willing to do what is necessary to make your business great, you might as well not start the business at all. Mike, so can you tell us, how can the audience learn from you? How can the audience connect with you if they want to work with you, or if they want to learn more from you? So can you just share some of your details?
Yeah, the best way to find me is at mikekonrad.com. Just remember that's Konrad spelled with a K. Thanks, Dad. Konrad with a K, Konrad. So mikekonrad.com is kind of a portal, and there's links to all the other websites that I have, and podcasts that I have, and a book that I've written, and all that stuff. But that's probably the best landing zone. There's also links to my company, Aqueous Technologies, on there. But rather than come up with, 8 different URLs, mikekonrad.com. And then if they want to email me with any questions, I'm happy to take questions. That would be mike@mikekonrad.com. So it should be easy to remember.
Yep. Awesome. I'm pretty sure the audience would have a lot of takeaways, especially with education marketing, shifting to conscious marketing. And then the last example that you brought up that I could recall, which is going from good to great. You want to build a great company. You can't just be good. You can't just expect to build an average good company. That's not how you want to sustain. So Mike, pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to connecting with you on another podcast soon.
Sounds good. I'm always happy to be here and make myself available. It's been great talking to you. And thanks for doing what you do, Harry. Your podcast really helps entrepreneurs by having guests on with different perspectives and different experiences. And thanks for putting all that together. I think it serves the entrepreneur community very well.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. All right, guys, if you found this podcast episode valuable, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And then also check out Mike at mikekonrad.com, or feel free to email him any of your questions. Thank you.